Welcome to For Rent, the Rent Report, a show where two self-proclaimed rental nerds talk about everything renting. My name is Hart Togman. I'm the CEO and founder of Rent Panda, and I'm here with my co-host MacKenzie Wilson of Single Key and Everything Landlording in Alberta, the guru of Alberta rentals, here to talk about everything renting.
Yep.
Mac, you are in an airport right now, and
Yeah.
so I think this is a perfectly topical topic to talk about in terms of renting sight unseen.
Yeah.
The Canadian rental marketplace is changing dramatically. Lots of immigration coming to the country, as we all know, and more people are even transient within the country. So we're going to talk about renting sight unseen. One first question to you: have you ever rented sight unseen or rented to someone sight unseen through your landlord?
I've done the latter. I've rented to someone sight unseen, so it can be done. And understandably so, the stereotypical response is a confused mind, or if you don't know what you don't know, you just say no to it. And the general consensus when we talk about fraud in the media as well is, if you can't be there in person, don't do it. That's where the fraud happens. I would argue that's correct in the normal situation, but I think nowadays there's so many different avenues online to build that trust, from doing video calls to looking on Google Streets and we can get right into it, but yes,
Yeah.
you can do it.
Awesome. And how was your experience when you did it? Good tenant, bad tenant, mediocre tenant, pain in the butt? What happened?
That's a good question. This one ended up being a little bit more difficult, but I don't think that was to do from the rent and sight unseen. It was, in this particular case, I actually had the mom reach out to me it was a couple of years ago now, and get her daughter in for, actually she was from Ontario, and get a hold of me. I was just super busy, and a lesson learned here is I took the inquiry from the mom. And anyways, the tenant ended up being like kind of difficult near the end, and broke the lease. Actually, broke the lease like second week of December. Lovely timing. And then it was quite distraught with me when I said that there was a releasing fee because you broke your lease. And so my lesson learned was I switched my process. Instead of going through all the leads I normally got, I took this call from a mother to place her daughter. Next time I'll just deal directly with the tenant that's the actual party that wants the rental,
Right.
as opposed to a parent or a family member.
Awesome. I think that's an amazing nugget, not at all to do with even renting sight unseen, but we often see that in our line of business doing leasing where people come through for others, right?
Yeah.
So a friend sends a friend because they can't come at the showing time, or a child is seeing the place for a parent because they're not as tech savvy and they haven't been able to be on Facebook Marketplace. And we found also that you lose that qualitative element of screening someone. And yes, you're evaluating, someone in their life, which is okay, but ultimately making sure that you can qualitatively screen them, whether it's in person afterwards or via video call or a phone call or something, is really important. And always engaging with them versus just, their proxy, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I would have been okay with it and going forward if the actual party is doing the initial contact and carrying that process with me, the communication as we go through the onboarding and then moving in and all that, I'd be okay with that. Then if something came up, they brought a proxy in to cover some of the steps because they're unavailable, that's fine, because if I was still dealing with them. But I didn't really even talk to the daughter until near the end, actually. And now
Right.
I'm like, in hindsight, I didn't exactly that. I didn't have a good enough feel on who they were. So
Right. So who do you see as a typical tenant profile that is renting sight unseen, either in Alberta or across the country? Is there a
yeah.
certain avatar that you see that's typically renting sight unseen?
Yeah, so the ones I've done have been someone, ones they're new to the city. So the last one I just did, actually, they're my current tenants right now. They're moving from Lethbridge to Alberta, and for people that don't know our geography, it's like a 2.5, if I'm guessing correctly, 2.5 hour drive. south of Calgary. And just from timing, from my schedule to when they wanted to come out, and there'll be a year this year. So this was last summer, we're at like 0% vacancy right now. So high
Right.
demand, super competitive. There was a lot of pressure. And I was like, well, here, listen, you look good on paper, uh, and we can kind of get into how it works after to build that trust. But yeah, there's someone out of the city. The schedules weren't quite there. Uh, Desperate to find a place, kind of a bit of a tight deadline. And then I don't know if I'd say it's younger people. It's career change. I guess career changes and change in cities is probably the tenant demographic I see on my side. How about you
Very
guys?
cool. Yeah, so probably being GTA centric, we see a lot of new immigrants coming through the door.
So yeah.
And proactive ones are going to be searching before they actually land. Oftentimes it is that proxy situation where someone is already in the city, a cousin, a friend, a sponsor, one of the family members, but maybe not the decision-making family member. And they're renting a room and now they're looking for a family home or a couple bedrooms. And so that's kind of the typical, especially in the GTA. And when we get outside of the GTA and some of the smaller markets in Ontario, we see a lot of that as well, where new immigrants are coming through to Thunder Bay or Timmins or Sudbury. And they're coming in because there's job opportunity there. The government is pushing more densification of those cities, and then they start to migrate south. And so we get people who are relatively new immigrants, but have lived in Thunder Bay for 2 years or lived in Sault Ste. Marie for 2 years, and then they're looking to move down to Barrie or Toronto or Whitby or Ajax or whatever it ends up being. And so there is this migration that's happening within the province. But typically the tenant avatar is going to be relatively new immigrants or completely fresh immigrants. We do see the odd other case, but the large majority is definitely from international immigration.
Okay.
Awesome. So what's your first step when let's say you've got a property and you know that it's likely going to get this type of traction. You're in a hot market. You've seen it beforehand. What do you do differently as the advertiser of your property to make sure it's conducive to starting the advertising process sight unseen?
Yeah. So it's about building trust, right? Giving the individual on the other side confidence. You are who you say you are. So one thing with I think an absolute necessary or necessity is you got to hop on a video call. They've got to be able to see you face to face, see what you look like. Definitely at the airport, so you can hear some noise in the background. But you got to see them face to face. And then I also make a point when I start the video call, I'm at the property, but I'm outside. So then they can physically see what the property looks like and see that I've got actual physical access entering the property. And then they can go after the fact and cross-reference with Google Maps to ensure that the address that they're applying for is what it looks like without ever seeing it on Google Maps. And then they just saw me physically walking the property, so I have access to it. So there's not like that already negates all the rental fraud ads where someone spins up a fake ad, takes someone else's photos, and then make some story why they're out of country for whatever reason, send me the deposit in advance kind of thing, and then the tenant loses their money.
Awesome.
So I think that part's critical. And then if there's a few additional degrees of confidence, ideally use single key or another third party credit check and service legitifies you. It's not like you're only trusting that video call. Now that I've authenticated it as a user, as a landlord user on the single key platform, and now they're coming into the single key platform and creating a tenant account. I have to jump through hoops to get my account set up because we do compliance. We check all the IDs of landlords before we can release credit information on individuals. So you're layering all these different systems that make it quite hard to disprove who you are. And I also share my LinkedIn profile, just all these layers that I guess if someone would work really, really hard, they could perhaps fake it, except for the video call, but it's super unlikely. And then it just builds that confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a really cool point just about, an individual landlord sharing their LinkedIn. Obviously, you've got more of an online presence than the average landlord. But I think that element of building trust from an advertising perspective is key. There are so many scams that we see on a day-to-day basis on the landlord side where people are faking ads and they're always coy about their ID. And so being forthright, even if you're a dentist, right, and you have a LinkedIn page or you're Googleable on, your practices page, whatever you are, just showing that you're a real person and that you're not worried about being transparent about who you are. And I think a lot of landlords often are a lot more worried than need be. They hide the address of the property because they're worried about vandalism and break-ins. They hide their identity because they worry about backlash and human rights complaints, which is totally fair. But if you're looking to attract, someone who's going to be renting sight unseen, you have to be conscious of the fact that they are going to be prey for the scammers out there on the landlord side, and go above and beyond to really be transparent about who you are. Yeah, and I think that's awesome. And on our end, what we do is we're transparent. We wear Rent Panda shirts at showings. We share our profiles. We're transparent that even when we're responding to ads, we say, hey, it's Hart from Rent Panda. Do you have any questions about the home? Here's my questions for you. And so not only, as landlords, we often try and collect information, right? Our job is to trust but verify, but collect and collect and collect. And we don't often think of sharing, right? Tell them about yourself, tell them about who you are as a landlord, what service you provide when people are living in your home, your experience.
Yep.
And that really just helps build that trust. And even at the very, very start, some cool things that you can do now, just from a video perspective, is you can film videos extremely easily and tag on like a little introduction. So you can do a standard walkthrough of the house and maybe just turn the camera on yourself at the end and say like, looking forward to finding that perfect tenant. And then when you do have someone coming through who, is going to be renting sight unseen, even before jumping on a video call with them, you can just record a quick video to respond to a Facebook message and say, hey, it's Hart, I'm the landlord, would like to ask you a few questions, right? And putting your face out there can often build that level of trust. We recently did this and had people, unfortunately they didn't go through and they didn't end up renting with us, but they wanted to give us a 5-star review because of the client engagement that they had. They had such a great experience, even though they didn't buy the product at the end of the day. And I think it's relatively rare with landlords to think about the service that you're providing.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point. I mean, one thing, Hart, I mean, for someone to give you a review without actually committing to your product shows what you guys are doing well up front. And that's really it. It's finding different ways to legitimize that yourself, and the more layers, or call them data points, whatever you want to call them, or touch points that you can do that confidence just gets higher and higher. So I mean, I also, and this is a double-edged sword, because this could be a whole nother conversation. I do have a Google review listing on my landlording property management business. So I've got 6 years now, 7 years of Google 5-star Google reviews. That has my name mentioned in it by various third parties that have rented for me, and so I've shared that. So that again legitimizes me. I share the associations I'm a part of. I'm a part of, in Calgary, it's the CRRA, the Calgary Residential Rental Association. So these kind of bodies that you wouldn't even know about unless you're local, and then they can go on Google and see that this is a not-for-profit that's been around Calgary since the 1960s. So, all right, so maybe this person's a little bit legit more to it. And like you said too, is adding a more of a personalized touch by almost embedding a video, like an email signature, but like a video signature at the end of your little like videos you send. And I've done that lots too with trying to communicate to someone instead of writing like a massive email. I'll spin up a recorded 2-minute conversation and just send a Google link or a link to the video in an email.
Yeah. People are so afraid of being on video, and overcoming that hurdle really builds a lot of trust. So speaking of trust, on your end, obviously, we've got the power of single key to verify documents and pull credit directly. But I think a lot of landlords, especially experienced landlords, run a lot on gut first. And again, they're going to verify documents, maybe yes or no, but they run a lot on gut. So you're an experienced landlord. How would you recommend someone who hasn't done it before trust or get that sense of a gut feeling without meeting them in person? What do you look for in a call, in a video call? What questions you ask? What are your top tricks there?
Good question, Hart. I just want to see someone engaged on the video call. Obviously look presentable. not like disheveled or anything like that. They just got out of bed or something like that, I guess. But like, just like, hey, I know like it is kind of like an interview. We've talked about this before. The viewing is both you feeling out the candidate or the lead, and then that last half of the viewing is more doing the sales, the marketing side, like trying to close them, say why this is a good vacancy or rental for them. So I like to see them asking questions. They're engaged. They're serious. If they're asking questions about logistics, like when it's available, how can I get access? How does the utilities work? Can I get access to the garage? These are all questions. I know the individual is genuinely and serious about renting for me. If they're not asking anything, they're not engaged, then I know it's a lead not probably not worth pursuing. And then yeah, I'm trying to think I thought about showing my ID on camera. I'm not super comfortable with that.
Hmm.
I mean, that's another possibility. But I also have told, I mean, this would mostly would only work for the landlords that own the property directly, but showing that my name's on title or telling like, hey, if you want to go pull title, here's how you do it in Alberta. Go do it yourself. It costs $10. You're more than welcome to. And I give that
Right.
option. I don't know if they ever follow through on that, but again, being very educational and giving the tools to the prospective lead on how to verify and go further if they want to do that.
Right. Very cool. Yeah, and I think, it may come second nature to you, but that little point that you said about seeing how they look on camera, I think people who take it seriously, who have spent the time with your ad, with the videos, with engaging with you by messaging and at that showing, they're going to take the time to prepare for it like an interview. And maybe it's a soft interview, but they're not going to show up in their pajamas. And one thing that people often forget that we love to look for is their backgrounds. Unfortunately, Zoom made it too easy to do virtual backgrounds and blurred
Yep.
backgrounds. But, I'm sitting here on camera and it's very easy to forget about everything that's happening behind me. And oftentimes tenants especially will be on their phone and they'll be, in the living room, or a couple of people will be joining that call because it's a family looking for it,
Yep.
and using all your senses, right? So being ready with your list of questions so you don't have to think about them on the fly, so that while someone is answering that question, you may or may not care about the answer, but you can get a sense of what's behind them, right? Does their place look messy? Are there dogs barking in the background? Are there kids screaming and running around? Are there like empty beer cans sitting in a corner somewhere?
Yeah.
And so all these little nuances of like using your other senses while the interview is happening is really interesting. And I think the last nugget on our end is we like to kind of throw people off a little bit we used to do this with interviews and casting calls in the advertising agency, but just asking someone things that aren't typical for a landlord to ask a tenant, and not in an intrusive way, but it's like, hey, what, like, tell me about your hobbies or something like that, or
Yeah.
what do you like to do on weekends, or like just sharing something about yourself, like, oh, I love to watch zombie movies. You like zombie movies at all? Like, just breaking down the conversation outside of the tenant landlord relationship will often get them out of their natural state of like, I need to answer these questions, I need to be on. And you get to see more of like who they are, where at a showing you can do that a lot easier. You see body language and they feed off of you. Whereas on a virtual call, it's sometimes harder to do, especially when
Yeah.
someone's nervous and they're in a tight rental market. They're just thinking about, how do I get this place?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Hart, you kind of got me thinking there, and I totally agree with the points you brought up. I think they're actually really, really good. Is if it's a party that's applying, I like to see everyone on that call, right? Like you say, if
Yeah.
it's a family, they're all present. I totally understand logistics. If one person works away or works remotely, then totally
Yeah.
fine. And that there's a legitimate reason for that. And I'll also be able to validate that information further on in the screening process, because when they fill in their application, they might include their LinkedIn profile. And I see, yes, the husband works remotely in Northern Alberta in the oil patch. Okay, that makes sense why he couldn't be available.
Right.
And then the other part where you mentioned about the barking dog is if they know this is a video call, they've taken the time to find a quiet area that makes the conducive time the video call.
Yeah.
So look at those little nuances to come across in the best light possible.
Yeah,
Good
for
points.
sure. And I think, preparing them for it too, because you don't want to be the person who springs it on them last minute, like showing that you have
Correct.
set it up, you're in a nice quiet place, that you are taking the time to really show them the place.
Mhm.
And we find this with virtual showings all the time, where oftentimes they're slotted in amongst regular showings,
Yep.
because we'll plan out 3-4 hours at a property and show 15 people, and 3 of them may be virtual. And so just treating them like anyone else. And if someone else is knocking at the door, you know, just excusing yourself, telling them to please wait, and then coming back to that person as if you would do if they were in person with you.
Yep.
And I think so much can be done virtually these days. But then I guess when it comes to screening them, obviously we've got all the digital tools under the sun nowadays to properly screen them. What do you do if people are uncomfortable with that screening process, or even uncomfortable, signing a lease digitally? Have you guys encountered that at all?
No, no, really, like when we're getting to that stage, I've probably talked to this individual 3 to 4 times on the phone. We've probably done a 15-minute video call, and again, talking about being outside the property, walking in, showing I've got the physical access to the property,
Mm.
walking it through slowly, explaining the sizes of the rooms, the layout, talking about how all these different things work. So they're very clear on what the property is and available. And I actually I think it's to the benefit when you're using a third party to do the screening process, because they're not directly giving you, like, if they're going to say choose to provide a SIN number because they've got maybe a more common name, they're
Mhm.
giving it to single key, or they're giving it to whichever third party. And then when I get the report back as a mom and pop landlord, we don't, at single key, we don't give the end users the SIN number of a tenant. We blank it out and just show the last 3 digits. So
Totally.
I think having that layer of separation with a I trust the third party in the middle really helps a lot. And by the time we get to that part, we've had so many touch points. They know who I am. When that digital lease request comes through an email with my name on it, it all makes sense. It's at that point, it's like, okay, I've been very clear. Here's the instructions. Here's how to do the utilities. Here's the insurance requirements for the property. And then by the time they sign the lease, I'm getting an e-transfer. And I do buy e-transfer as well. I mean, I'll say if it's sight unseen, it has to be online in some form or fashion. I
Yeah.
really try to stay away from cash, because it becomes a he said, she said if there's no receipts involved. Even if you do a paper one, it's messy. Whereas if it's digital, you have an email confirmation. It's another third party, the Interact e-transfer, giving you that paper trail, right?
Yep,
So,
for sure. And how are you ultimately verifying this person is who they say they are?
well, I've seen them on camera,
Hmm.
and I'll say that, hopefully, again, going back to what you said, it's done in a very conducive setting with it's well lit, so it's not like the face is all black and it's like midnight or something. But
Yeah.
I've gotten a very like, no hats on, like I like the way we're talking right now. I can
Right.
clearly see who you are, Hart. And then when I look at the ID, okay, good. This person looks the same age, same
Yep.
sex, all the kind of the key kind of things. And then I'm pretty comfortable at that point going and signing. What we got coming down the road, I mean, this is a bit of a product plug. Where and we did talk about this last episode about AI and all that stuff. There's 2 things we're doing right now with AI at Silky, and it's automating the fact checking of documents to ensure they haven't been photoshopped or manipulated. That's one. So that pay stubs, letters of employment, work permits, anything that gets uploaded, we can kind of start doing that. But the other
Hmm.
thing too is we're doing an ID verification. So currently, the way our platform works is you're allowed to upload a government issued ID. It could be a passport, driver's license, whatever. And then we just give it to you. And we go, "Hey, go fishing, Hart. All up to you, bud." But now we're collecting that ID. We're also collecting a selfie at the same time. So then now we've got a stronger foundation of paper trail. And then we'll do an analysis, which is like an algorithm called AI. Well, we'll give you a confidence rating that this person in the ID is in fact the same person in the selfie. And so then you have a higher degree that this person is who they say they are, which will really help in this carry about knowing your customer and are they actually who they say they are.
Right. Right. Very cool. And
Yeah.
and I think that's so important. It's surprising to me every day how many landlords don't collect ID in the application stage or at the move-in stage at any point in time. And especially as we become, a globalized economy and a globalized country as a whole, what we see more and more is that people's names vary, like their legal name varies dramatically from names that they're using from,
Yeah,
yeah, even in
absolutely.
some employment and especially on social platforms, right? And so when we're carrying someone through from a Facebook engagement through to an application through to a lease,
Mhm.
The worst thing to happen is to mistakenly put, a common name or a pseudonym onto that lease document. Then when things go wrong, that lease comes in front of the landlord tenant board, and essentially all of your documentation, whether it's N4s, N5s, whatever they are,
Yeah.
valid because
Yeah.
it's not that person.
Yeah.
And so it's a minor tidbit. And again, I think, as experienced landlords and as people in the industry, we think, yep, okay, of course, you're going to collect ID, and now we can actually verify it, and we don't have to trust ourselves to look for the little nuances. We can trust the machines that are much smarter than us. But even the fact of collecting that ID to ensure that you're naming the right people on that
Yeah.
lease is
It's
incredibly important.
so involved. I mean, maybe I've been in the industry long enough. I can see how it's awkward if someone's brand new, but
Hmm.
you have to build up so much trust in a very short period of time as a homeowner to be confident enough to give complete control of probably the most expensive single thing you own to a complete stranger you've just met. Like, it's a business. The more you can treat it like the business, the better off you'll be. You brought up an interesting point. You got me thinking here with that with using Facebook as a marketplace. I mean, that's your guys' main listing platform. I was just discussing this last night at a real estate meetup, talking about um, there's a Privacy Act and what you're allowed to ask for and all that. And every piece of information you collect has to have a business justification that a reasonable person would see being reasonable.
Right.
And I'm wondering, because technically social media does not fall into the purview of doing your due diligence online. It's not related to the core need of renting or to the business need. I wonder if you are finding individuals deliberately through the platform, if that changes that
Yeah,
requirement.
it may, and what we're finding is that, especially as Facebook Marketplace and the home rental section of Facebook Marketplace becomes more and more elaborate,
Mm.
people's seller profiles and their profiles in general actually have a lot more meaning and bearing and weight. So if you were on Airbnb and you had someone apply or request to rent out your home and you had the setting where you have to approve them, you're looking at their rating, right? You're looking at a crowdsourced rating
Yep.
of whether that person is good or not. And in the rental industry, that doesn't exist. And especially in Ontario and other provinces, you can't have a bad tenant list or technically a bad landlord list. You can have open documentation with, open room and Canley and whatnot, but there's no lists like that. And there's been attempts at crowdsourced review platforms, but I think Facebook now, with its ability to carry through a transaction from a rental listing into a rented listing, they allow you to, it's not mandatory, but they allow you to identify who you sold to, how the interaction was, and what you actually rented the place for. So Facebook is going down this road of becoming, a more refined rental marketplace,
Mhm.
ultimately for their own selfishness. But
Yeah.
what it now does is you can see a seller profile. And so you can look at someone and go, this person is renting out, this 3-bedroom home. They also sold a pack of used tennis rackets last week, a used dresser and a new KitchenAid. And like, you can see someone's kind of approach to business on that platform.
A little
Yeah.
of like legitimacy. I was just gonna mention, and you got me thinking, Hart. I mean, is when I look at these online accounts to validate that someone's who they say they are, I want to see history to it. I don't
Yeah.
want a brand new Facebook account that's got one profile picture and everything's locked down. There's no details, and it's 30 days old.
Yeah.
No, I don't like that. But if I can see
For
someone
sure.
put a time and put a few years into building an account, there's enough pictures that what's normally considered, I guess, normal to share. I don't
Yeah.
need to overshare, but then they've got like some friends, they've done some check-ins, all those little things, like you said, you can see the seller's history on the marketplace is they're a real person, as opposed to how much effort it takes
Yeah.
to fake all that, and then you layer that with other areas that you can check online. It helps you
Yeah.
get that confidence.
And I think we're probably better off and more biased being millennials who have used
Yes.
face and stayed on Facebook during kind of
Yeah.
the downtime. But we actually do see more and more young renters jumping back onto Facebook, and they have fresh platform or fresh profiles, and they're just starting to kind of get back on it. But you can still see some activity. But it's interesting how Facebook prevalence has come back because of the rental marketplace experience.
That is an interesting observation. I
Yeah.
haven't thought of it that
Yeah.
way.
Well, I mean, my nieces used to make fun of me for being on Facebook years ago, and now, they're looking for rentals and they're buying and selling used things on it, and so
Uh,
their sole use of Facebook is for marketplace. They don't post updates or anything like that, but it's a marketplace platform now, and I think Facebook is gearing towards that. But
yeah, it's
yeah, it is important to go through people's social profiles and make sure you're validating.
yeah, that's a good point. I do see it going that way. Like Facebook's more of this, not the town square. I mean, I know that's what Twitter or X is kind of going for, but it's like the virtual equivalent of a lot of the day-to-day necessities of just living in society, right? A
Yeah.
marketplace to buy and sell stuff. Obviously, from my case, I don't really do a lot of posts either. I generally just use it for the Facebook groups that I run for the landlords group, and so these special interest groups are kind of where I find the value in it. That, yeah,
And we see a lot of like neighborhood groups too, right? So when you
yep,
move into a neighborhood, whether renting or buying, there's a lot of neighborhood groups that are, neighborhood buy and sells and free giveaways and, potlucks in the park and that kind of interaction. And I think more and more people are using Facebook primarily for marketplace groups, those types of lifestyle interactions. And then, you've got your TikTok and Instagram for pure content plays, but
yep,
the use of Facebook has definitely shifted, and for us at least, it's a very important part of someone's rental application, because they have to show good consumer behavior, right? In the same way that we wouldn't rent to a 1-star Airbnb person, or,
yep.
if that Uber driver shows up at your door and they're a 2-star, well, I don't think they can exist on the platform as a 2-star anymore, but, you would be pretty wary of the service that they're about to provide.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Awesome.
this is probably a good time to wrap it up. I think this was good conversation, and so do you guys? I'm curious. One last question as we do wrap it up. How often do you guys rent sight unseen around Canada?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of these, manual things where we're on site, but the person is not on site,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
And whether or not they are a sight unseen renter, we're going to be doing those video calls either way. We want to understand everyone who's living in the home. We do those video tours just in case. And typically with any rental, there's always going to be one or two applications that come through or inquiries that come through that are sight unseen. And so it's kind of built into our process to be comfortable with it, be open to it, and accept those applications. And kind of like I mentioned beforehand, when we're doing viewings, some may be virtual, some may be live. And for us, it's almost inconsequential at this point, because the process is just seamless, and we just replace in-person stuff with video stuff to get that
exactly.
sense. Go a little bit deeper in verification. And we've got the people on the ground, but the rental marketplace is changing dramatically, and certain markets have a lot of new influx of people. So we want to be flexible, and ultimately, I think there's going to be landlords out there that aren't comfortable with it. And back to one of our earlier conversations, and a plug to our probably first or second episode, you have to define who you are as a landlord first, right? And as an investor first. If you're
Yep.
not comfortable with it, if you need to be the person that meets someone face to face, that walks them through the place, then that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Move away from it, don't accept it. But as a company, we know that it's a good portion of the population now. And so we have to address that. We have to be able to build systems for it so that we give our landlords the best chance at placing high quality tenants, regardless of where they're living right now.
Yep. It'll make sense. I 100% agree with that. I mean, pick your tenant avatar, your demographic, and if you like seniors that like paper, then
Yep.
great. You can probably still kill it because that's a large population still out there that will perform and operate that way.
Yep, for sure. Awesome. Well, let's wrap up here, and we will talk next week. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening in.